Hi everyone and welcome back to round 5 of the 2024 FIDE Candidates Tournament. It's been a dramatic day. We did end up seeing 2 decisive results there, deep into the 6th hour of play after some marathon games. But first of all, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into one game that did finish a bit earlier, the encounter between Praggnanandhaa and Nepomniachtchi. And this game was important in the standings, of course. Nepomniachtchi, before this round, was the sole leader, and he was up against a determined opponent. Nepomniachtchi, with black, faced 1e4, and he met it with his favorite opening, the Petrov defense. Praggnanandhaa did pause a lot in the early stages, maybe trying to lure Nepomniachtchi into a false sense of security, but as we'll soon find out, Praggnanandhaa did have a opening bomb up his sleeve, some fantastic preparation and a novelty soon to come. But first, the Petrov defense. This is one of the main lines. Black temporarily giving up a pawn and winning back the pawn on e4. We saw a bit of symmetry now after the pawn structure kind of declared itself, d4, d5. Very normal developing moves, very mainline theory here, something that Nepomniachtchi has employed before. And during the commentary with Danya and Judith earlier, we were saying this is mainline, this has all been seen before. Where is the surprise going to be? It's got to be something big, and it was indeed in this very normal looking position. First, bishop g5, the start of impressive tempo play by Pragg, and next move, knight to h4. And here we were discussing various ideas, but bishop e6 still the main move, forcing a trade of pieces. The white bishop on c4 attacked, the white bishop on g5 also attacked, and opposite color bishops did ensue. White's knight forced to retreat to defend itself. The black queen hit, and she slid across to a5. And here, the only move I'd ever seen before was bishop back to b3, sitting on a nice long diagonal, staring down at the black king. But this would allow the black knight to join action on d7. The d7 square, a key square for the knight's dreams. Later on, the knight needs to come over to defend the king side. Pragg here introduced a very rare move after queen to a5, bishop to h3. And this is one Judith mentioned in passing. It immediately was played on the board, and it did immediately throw Nepomniachtchi off his stride. Here he did capture a pawn on c3, and after rook to b1, b6, we saw a couple more moves, and now d5, a second pawn sacrifice. Pragg's trademark, Praggnanandhaa throwing pawns off the board left, right, and center throughout all of the rounds so far in the candidates. And this is based on a short, sharp tactic here. Queen takes d5, runs into rook to d3 with a skewer. The black bishop drops off on d6. But the other point is to sideline this black queen. She's now struggling to get back in the game, and queens are great defenders. If she's so far distanced, divorced from her own king, then there might be problems ahead, and we saw those problems in a moment. C takes d5, played in this position, taking the bait. 2 pawns up now for black, but that is irrelevant. Knight g5, and black's king suddenly feeling the heat. One attacker, this white knight. The queen soon to join. The bishop may be joining as well, and the rook. 4 potential attackers, and the black king lacking defenders. We saw pawn to h6, maybe questioned by the computer, but very concrete play, allowing a knight sacrifice. Double exclamation point here for this knight jump, but clearly part of Pragg's preparation. He barely spent any time by this moment. And obviously this is based on the fact that rook takes would walk into a nasty, devastating pin. But king takes knight, which was played, not necessarily guiding black to safety either. Now, various moves available for white. Praggnanandhaa continued to blitz out. He played rook to d3. Let's ignore that question mark. Very good move here. Multiple threats, including the simple rook takes d5. And knight d7, a very creative defense from Nepomniachtchi, who was by now already 30-40 minutes behind on the clock, giving up the knight, but just trying to get time to develop, especially this black rook in the corner, which in various kind of lines could have been trapped. The white bishop was at some point threatening to deliver a check and trap this rook in the corner. So Nepomniachtchi tries to give the piece back. But after rook takes d5, we saw the first real mistake of the game. Bishop takes h2 was pointed out, a very difficult move, but it was pointed out by the computer based on the fact that after king takes, knight to c5, we would reach a very similar position to the one we saw in the game, but with black having won a pawn and having lured the white king out to a potentially vulnerable square. Instead, we saw knight to c5, and given a question mark, rook takes d6, winning the piece back, level material now, and after king to g8, a check. And this is where Praggnanandhaa, maybe the most critical moment of the game, he missed a winning continuation. It was difficult, it wasn't obvious, but ultimately this is where the point slipped away. And queen to e5 was potentially the winning move. A pin and a big threat of rook takes h6 now. We were unsure at first what white would do after queen takes pawn on a2, but if white were to resist temptation of taking this pawn with a check and to first build up with bishop f5, something Pragg tried in the game, just in the wrong order, then white would have obtained a winning attack. Rook takes h6 is now a devastating check, followed by bishop h7 check ideas. The black king, if it moves, would have walked into the incredible bishop to b1. A really difficult retreat. Retreats are the most tricky to spot in chess, especially when you're attacking, focused, zeroed in on the opponent's king. But this would have opened up new avenues towards the black king. Now, no matter where the black queen goes, there are downsides. If the black queen retreats, for example, to the f7 square, then one of maybe multiple winning moves here for white would be queen back to b2. Really tricky, hard to see from afar, and really understandable that Pragg would miss this. This sets up a killer threat of bishop a2 with a devastating win of the black queen, pin, skewer, whatever you want to call it. And the problem for black is that there's no safe haven for this king. It wants to step into the corner, but the queen along this diagonal now allows rook takes h6 check, again winning. Just the x-ray vision, the long range kind of power of these pieces would have been decisive. Instead, however, Pragg, he played this idea in the wrong order, as we mentioned, bishop to f5 first, and allowing a counter tactic, a counter shot, knight to b7, the only move found by Nepomniachtchi. And this is based on a X-ray vision attack on the white bishop along the 5th rank. White can't keep the minor pieces on the board unless a queen trade happens, and that is indeed what occurred. Queen takes a5, knight takes, pawn to g4, and yes, white has an advantage here. The bishop superior to the black knight for now. Yes, white's rook is more active than any of its counterparts, and yes, there's a plan of pushing the pawns forward, but ultimately these things don't add up to enough, and we saw over the course of the next few moves Nepomniachtchi defend in really, really impressive fashion. First, he centralized his knight, he brought his rook into the game, finally, and after pawn to h3, maybe a bit of a hesitant move, losing some more of the advantage, we saw the knight centralize, and now this move, pawn to g6 and pawn to g5, based on a really nice tactic. Rook to e1 now, which looks like it would be really annoying for the black knight, would walk into knight to d3. Loose pieces drop off, as they say. This white rook undefended, and after rook takes rook, an intermediate move, a Zwischenzug, a check, and next move, a capture, level material again, and black's knight would have improved itself. Ultimately, the dark squared bind here allowed black to save himself, and if we continue along the game continuation, we saw Nepomniachtchi, look at this, everything, pawns, pieces, everything on dark squares, and no way forward for white with the light squared bishop. Eventually, we saw pieces disappear from the board. We saw a trade of bishop for knight, and here, this attack on the bishop, gaining black enough time to save his pawns. Ultimately, Nepomniachtchi, throughout the rest of the game, guided it to safety. And not much else to discuss here. Praggnanandhaa, he knew he'd missed his chance. We saw it on the camera, head in hands, and Nepomniachtchi. Candidates might be his favorite tournament, but he did have a bit of luck in this game. A draw, and Nepomniachtchi maintains the shared lead after round 5.